And we're having them really because of kind of a philosophy change and a consideration of the Engage West philosophy. And that is, we don't do some of these things that we do part-time. We really do them full-time. And it's important for us to have this time together each month so we can get together, collaborate, talk about the things that are important to us as a division. And so we decided really that to continue these throughout the summer. Now we realize that people many times take vacations throughout the summer, but also people take vacations at any time of the year. And so, so our division is 100% full-time all the time. Very few of us are off as wholesale for any given amount of time. So that's why we decided, let's go ahead and have the staff development meetings, leadership team meetings, extended leadership team meetings, all of those pieces throughout the summer, realizing that we're busy and we may have to change some of them. But that's really where we're going with this, and so I appreciate you being here. Today we are going to do a little bit of the rollout of our divisional Engage West results. Okay, so but what we'll do first is we will ask anybody who is new since the last staff development meeting, if you have not been introduced yet to the division, to stand up, and I'm going to have you introduce yourself. So anybody who has not yet been introduced to the division, now is the time to stand up. Can you hand this over to her because she wants to make this deal?
In case you can't read or see my pretty picture up there on the news, it's noteworthy. I am the new director of the ESC. Oh, and I am Jennifer Jordan, for those of you that don't know who I am. And the ESC has transitioned an employee from the call center into our center. Kendra Beal is now a departmental associate.
Excellent. Any other new people that have not yet been introduced? Well, that's great. Fantastic. So I'm going to go ahead and transition this, and we're going to get to, obviously you've seen the news and noteworthy. I'm going to do just a little bit of a transition here to get to our new PowerPoint. Okay, so welcome back, John. Good to see you. So what we're talking about today are the divisional results for Engage West. Now, generally, when you do your rollout in your areas, you're going to do not only the results, but then action planning. And so this is such a big group that we won't do the actual action planning in this meeting today, but what we'll do is give you the opportunity and the way to do that as we go out over time. And I'll give you a timeline on this, and we'll kind of go through everything. Now, this is a pretty highly statistical, not super stats, but a lot of data in this report, because again, the survey is essentially data. So I'm going to ask you to stick with me, and as we go through, you'll start seeing some themes, and you'll start seeing some information that then we can take action on later. So, what is the purpose of Engage West? I just want to hear from you. What do you think the purpose of Engage West is? Just yell it out. Not all at once. Wow. Engagement. Yes, that's good. Let's give him a round of applause. That's awesome. Yeah. Anybody else? What's the purpose of Engage West? Assessing and improving campus culture. Someone else said? Make it a better place to work. What? Learn, to be the best place to, yeah, okay, great. So that's the outcome. It's not necessarily the purpose. So the purpose on the website says it's identifying areas in which our communications, leadership, procedures, and/or policies need revision and improvement, and provide us with the necessary information to map a route towards institutional success. right? So the concept is we're going to identify some things here, we're going to do something to change it, and then we're going to be successful later on. And hopefully successful even now, and you'll see some of that. So the route that we've chosen to get to there is employee engagement, and then leadership development and accountability. And that's what Engage West does for us. The survey gives us information so we can do this bottom part. So we can change ourselves in ways that help you feel better about working here and a more engaged employee in working here, but also the leadership development and the accountability piece. That's what the LDIs are all about. Leadership Development Institutes. Some of us go away for at least a day, 4 times a year. We actually come into here, and we learn a lot about our individual leadership development and how that relates to assessment and accountability and the things that are necessary so that we can have a strong foundation to be able to be great managers and leaders for the rest of our division. So that's what Engage West is all about. That's why we do the survey, to get information from you and us about that. So if the main purpose is employee engagement, leading to a better campus, a better place to work, learn, and succeed, in the spring of 2014, we did our first Engage West survey. And in that first Engage West survey, our employee engagement in the division was at a mean of 3.90. Okay? Out of a 5-point scale, we were at a 3.90. And so I'm going to talk a little bit in the next slide about kind of those methods and some things, but 3.90 is pretty good. In this survey, we're at a 4.11. Now, if you know much about statistics, that's a pretty big difference in terms of the overall change. That's a 0.19 change, and that's a pretty big difference. A mean difference of 0.19 from the university, or the UWG 3.92. Okay? So things are very, very good here. Things are strong here. You are engaged. We are engaged together to do a lot of these things. So I wanted to start off with that great news. And there's a lot more great news behind this, but I wanted to start off with that. Usually when you do a second iteration of a climate type of a survey, you usually actually go backwards a little bit or stay pretty much the same. And the reason is because your awareness now is heightened. Now you know better about how to answer the questions and what the questions mean and all those kind of things. So generally what happens, there's generally a little bit of a step back, or you stay kind of the same. But we jumped ahead, and I think that is really emblematic of the work we've been doing in our division, both at the senior leadership level, but also at all levels of the division, and you'll see some of those results. So the method. We have a new survey in 2015. It's not the same as it was in 2014, so it's not directly comparable. Okay? We have, though, through Marissa, done a little bit of the crosswalk of some of the questions across those 2 surveys, and you'll see some of those results. I want to talk a little bit about the rollout method, general themes, and then the timeline for the complete rollout. But the rollout method, what we're going to do in this presentation today is I'm going to talk about relative strength of difference between means. And so you know that the mean is essentially the average of all scores, right? It's the average of all of our scores put together. I'm going to talk institutional results. I'm going to talk about themes of greatest strength in the division. I'm going to talk about themes of greatest opportunities to the division, and the divisional comparison of 14 to 15, and then a comparison of the institution in 15. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on the last one there, but I have several slides that will show you some of those pieces. And then I'm going to talk at the end about general themes and timeline, how this thing moves forward. So relative strength of difference. On this scale, because it's a scale of 5 is the best score you could have gotten, then 3.5 is pretty decent, and 4 is excellent. And anything above 4 is really, really good, right? Now, because we don't have a benchmark to another industry like we did last year. Last year we did healthcare, and we benchmarked against the 75th percentile of healthcare. Remember how confusing all that was? Well, we don't have that now for ours. So we don't have this concept of the standard of a plus or minus 0.3 difference in that mean. So when I looked at these scores, I said, okay, so where is it? I asked Marissa, she said, oh, that's probably right. We're at a plus or minus 0.10 as we look at these. So whenever you see something that is minus a 0.10 or a plus 0.10, that's when you can start to think, oh, yeah, that's probably making a difference. That's probably something we should be looking at. And the more, the farther along that scale you get, the more important that is, the more drastic it is, the more we should be paying attention to it. This then helps us drill down to those things with the greatest strength and greatest opportunities. We could look at this whole thing, pick out every one of them and say we're going to do something about it. But the truth is, in our world, we need to focus on those very top things that will make a difference. And that's what you're going to see in this presentation. And then remember at the bottom there, this is an aggregate of all of our scores in the division. 150 some people took the survey in our division. And that, so this is an aggregate of all those scores at the division level. Your department also has scores. And your scores may not look like these, because remember, this is the concept of means. Sometimes your department may be lower on items and another department may be higher on items, but there's a mean in between there. Or sometimes your department may be much higher on items and another department lower on items. And so this is the mean of the division. It doesn't mean in your individual department. So if you sit there and see something up there and you say, well, that's not like it is for my department, you're probably right. Right? Because your department scores are about your department. And when your manager rolls those out, you'll be able to talk about the action items in those. So this is the overall scores of our division compared to the university. So the university is in the blue, and our scores are on the red hash. So the red line is our scores. You can see the key down here at the bottom. And so you can tell on every item except for one, we have beat the university mean. Okay? Every item except for one, we beat the university mean. So what does that mean to beat the university mean? I don't really know, because there are so many different units and departments and different methods of working and different roles out there at the university that I don't know how important it is. I mean, I'm proud that we have beat the means of the whole university, but those are also just the opinions of the whole university about their part, not about our part relative to their part. Okay, get what I mean by that? But on every item, these are the major categories of the Engage West survey. Okay? We're going to drill down on some of these in a bit. So the divisional results. 72 out of 86 of the actual questions, we were above the university mean on those. So 76, or 83%, almost 84%, our results were above the university mean. There were only 6 items where we were, 6 questions themselves, where we were at the point, or negative 0.10 or below. So 6 out of 86 questions, we are in that realm of, gosh, we probably need to really pay attention to this. There are other things we need to pay attention to, obviously, to maintain where we are and to improve where we are, but only 6 items are we at that we really need to pay attention at level. We scored above the mean in 12 of the 13 major categories. That was the previous slide. And some areas surpassed significantly. We don't know statistically significant or not, but these are some of the areas where we are surpassing very broadly, and you can see that on that previous slide. So you can see some of them where the red bar is very far out from the blue bar. Got that? Okay. So our greatest strengths in the division. I want you to start thinking about themes. I want you to start seeing patterns, okay? Now, I've helped you in this slide because I have bolded, italicized, and underlined some people. Institutional leader, department leader, immediate manager, institutional leader, department leader. Okay, so those are the items, and you can see their relative strength out here, 0.48 down to 0.36. That's how far from the university mean our departments are. Your scores put our departments, institutional leaders, department leaders, that far out on the mean scale. So again, when I said it's above a 0.1, and you can really develop an idea about the strength of that, we're 4 times that in some of these areas. Okay, so I want you to really pick that up. Now, the next area, and I'm going to show that this is a graph of that same thing. So if you are a more visual learner, you can see, and DL means department leader, IL is institution leader, which is John DeLisha, and IM is the immediate supervisor. So these are the same items, just in a different graphical representation. Again, thank you, Marissa, for helping me out with all those kind of things. Okay, so you can see that. And I'll send out this PowerPoint after our presentation so that you can look at it more clearly and within your own time. So divisional greatest opportunities. So these are areas, and I've helped you with the theme here, right? Senior leaders. Now in this context, senior leaders, when you answered the question, it had both me and Kyle in that question. I didn't like that methodology because, I didn't want him bringing my scores down, really, frankly. But when you answered this question, it was about Kyle and me specifically, because our names were there in this survey, right? You weren't saying this about Mr. Sutherland or Dr. Estes or Dr. Crafton. You were saying this about me and Kyle. And so these are some of the items. Some of these are not going to surprise you because they have been themes on the previous Engage West survey, right? Making progress in some of them, and I'll show you some of the progress later. But there are some things on there that we may not be able to affect directly, we may be able to influence, like for instance the second one. The second highest strength of opportunities in our area is about the university website, right? So we can influence that by doing great things with our own websites, which equal the university website, but we can't all of a sudden define, okay, the website's going to be better. We're actually part of a process right now to help that, where John is sitting in, and I don't know if there's any others of us that are sitting in for an RFP proposal to get a new content management system and a company that does the marketing for our website. So we took this information and we're doing something about it. But I do want to bring you to the point that I made earlier about the relative strength. Remember, that was at a negative 0.10 or below in the negative sense, or a 0.10 or above in the positive sense. So you can see some of these items, even though they're in our top 10, they don't even reach that level of strength in terms of what we would think about. What are you going to focus on? What are you going to work on? And this, again, reflects your answers on the survey. So there's some things up there to work on, absolutely. And that's what, when we go across time and do the rollout, and when you do your rollouts, you'll give information, you'll give ideas as to how to work on some of these things. So we will ask you questions like, when you say senior leaders want to know how I feel, and you say minus 2.20, what do you really mean by that? You're saying that I don't want to know how you feel, right? That's what that's saying. So how do I express to you that I do want to know how you feel? And your directors will talk you through some of those questions of how to get to actions to be able to affect these scores. Now, I'm going to show you some scores that are going to show you that we've done that in this last year quite a bit. So again, a graphic representation of that. Some of them are out to the 0.0 level out there, 0.20 level. Remember, our strengths were, many of them were double that. At the 0.20, our strengths were even double that. So I want you to put that into context as far as how positive things are happening, and in the overall context of engagement, moving from a 3.9 to a 4.11, that shows that there's a lot of direction here. Okay, so drilling down a little more on senior leadership, because that's what came out in our results, right, is the things we need to work on. This is the chart, and again, thank you, Marissa, for helping with this. That needs a little bit of explanation, but it's actually very graphical that helps, okay? So the left side, or the right side of this chart is the difference from institution on those items. So I think highly of senior leader, and remember you're talking about me and Kyle. Senior leader, sincere and wanting to know how I feel. Senior leader, I'm confident. So this is the item of senior leader. The right side is the difference from the institution and where they are relative to the mean over there. -1, -0.1, -0.2. But the left side is the difference from our prior results. So if you look at last year's results, and we have the same questions except for this one at the end where it says senior leader are helping to move UWG in a positive direction. We didn't have that score last year, so we don't have a comparison on that. But all of the other ones we do have a comparison on. You can see that the difference from year to year is in a positive direction. And that's really what I wanted you to see, that not perfection, but direction. If you're a parent, you know what that means, right? You don't reward perfection. If they even pee on the floor in the bathroom, you're really happy about that, right? They're at least in the bathroom, right? So, I'm peeing on the floor in the bathroom. Thank you very much. Just thought I would use that, continue on. No, things are going okay, right? This is the difference from last time. And if you see, for instance, the idea, are transparent, we're making decisions. If you remember from last year's results, that was the top thing. That was the most egregious thing that came out in my results. It's gone up over a 0.5, more than 5 times the standard that we've talked about in terms of what we would say is an important difference, okay? So, again, the idea of Engage West survey is to identify the areas where we need to work on them, and see the difference. And that's what you see in this screen right here. You see some difference. Now, we have these kind of things all over the division. All over, in terms of our individual scores. And you have different items in your area that you'll see some of these. You'll see other items that maybe didn't move as much. Maybe some items that backtracked a little. But the concept is continuous improvement, doing this over time, and understanding that we're doing it over time to be great about this engagement piece. So I'm going to go through a series of slides here. I'm not going to read all the slides. I'm going to make some brief comments about the slides, but you're going to have this as a PowerPoint. You can look through it later on. I'm not going to do that, okay? But the title of the slide should give you some indication. So these are the actual scores on specific questions in the engagement survey. In this slide, there are some items where we as a division went down and we're still below the university mean, okay? That's a high indication to me that we need to do something to work on these, right? Not only are we below the mean, but we also went down in our own scores. And some of them, the number one is the website, right? Policies are applied fairly to all faculty and staff. We heard that message last year. Did we do enough this year to make any difference in that? The answer probably is no. University is consistent in handling issues. So you see a pattern here. It's a climate pattern around consistency, right? Consistency in treatment. Staff were treated fairly. And again, that some of those are below what would be our standard of the 0.10. Some of them are. So they're important because both of them went down, or were below the university mean, and we also went down in those areas. Okay? This is an interesting one. Discrimination is not tolerated at UWG. That one on last year's survey was, in our division, through the roof. It was at a 4.10, which was a lot different than the whole university. We actually went down in that area. We went below the 4.0. And that's something to ask ourselves about. Why did that happen? What are we doing? Are we just more aware? Or are we actually doing something to affect that score? Okay, those are good questions. We need to ask ourselves those questions. Another group of questions. We went down, but we're still above the UWG mean. Okay? So some of the areas that we went down in are things that we can do and talk about and ask questions about and put in action. I have a clear understanding of what's expected of me in my work. We were way up there. 4.3, we went down to a 4.09, which is still a good score, but that's a difference of a 0.21, something we need to look at, right? But we're still above the university mean of 4.03. And you can see the different ones going down, right? My work positively impacts the success of students. We were at a 4.7, went down to a 4.55. 4.55 is still fantastic, right? And so you can see how maybe a group of people who answered this 3 instead of 4 or 4 instead of 5 can really make a difference in the overall score, especially at 155 respondents, right? These are some of the department leaders sincere in wanting to know how I feel went down a little bit in that area. So you saw on the other slide that is excellent compared to the university mean, but it went down a little bit in this survey. So we'll look at that in the next survey to see what the direction is. So there are some good things there. Where we went up, but we're still below the university mean. And you can see some of the senior leader things in there. So use the previous chart, you can see, okay, we're still below the mean, but we're moving in the right direction. My pay is fair when compared to similar colleagues in similar organizations. It's pretty low at a 2.5, so message heard over several years. But it went up to a 2.6, and that is above where we are at the university mean of a 2.65. Or just slightly below, I'm sorry, but we're still below. Okay, see some of those? So we had some big gainers, really big gainers. And you can see again, when it says the difference out here in the middle column, that's what this is sorted on. 0.46 is a really big difference. You saw some of the others at a 4.8 compared to the university. This is comparing ourselves across time, 14 to 15, and those are some of the difference. So one that I'm proud of is the top one. 2.90 in 2014, but 3.36, went up by 0.46 in this past year. Your results suggest that we're doing better at treating employees better, right? Provided with adequate funding for my professional development. By the way, this survey was administered before I told you how much professional development money we do as a division in our last meeting. So you already kind of felt it, right? It may not be indicative of your individual department. Remember, this is the division. A lot about institutional leaders in here. I have a clear understanding of the future direction of UWG. 4.19 is kind of on that line. Sorry about that. But we've done a pretty decent job in this last year of engaging you and seeing what the future might look like in goal setting, in strategic planning, and all those things that are really boring, almost as boring as a full data presentation that you're going to see this morning. but we've been engaging you in that, so you have a sense as to where we're moving. I'm giving credit for my contributions and achievements. Again, went up in that. UWG is effective at retaining valuable people. We were really, really bad in the last score. We're better, but not good enough in this score, right? So you can see some of those. Now there are some non-comparable items. So when they did the survey this last time, they really created it for higher ed instead of the previous survey, which was mostly created for healthcare. And so they rearranged items in our own language and our own culture, and so they're not directly comparable. And I told you earlier, we don't have an official comparison. We're actually going to get that this week. Some of these may actually be compared, but the best judgment of Marissa and myself, we couldn't find it. We couldn't find the comparison directly. But this will show differences between, and I'm sorry there are two difference columns, because there isn't data in the 2014. But you can see some of the big gainers that we have over the university in terms of those means. So we're comparing ourselves this year's score to the university this year's score on these items. Again, some of these you already know because you saw them on previous charts, but these are some really good pieces for us to say. These are wins. These are really good things for us to say. We're doing okay here. We still need to maintain them at least, but we're doing okay. And there are a few more non-comparable items here. And I went down to the 0.10, right? Went down to the 0.10 so you can see all of those since that's our standard. Okay. So some major themes. Very positive in most areas. Again, 76 out of, 76 out of 86. Something like that at the beginning. We had a higher mean than the university. Our institutional and department leadership is very strong compared to the rest of the university. That's what that mean says to us, right? Those gainers, the strengths that I put up earlier. Some of the scores, even for those groups, though, were down from last year. So those people who are essentially AVPs, John Militia, and department directors need to take a look at that within their own units and say, okay, so what did my unit say, and how can I put in action items to maintain that high standard, right? Pay and benefits. Clearly, we've worked at it, but continued progress is needed. So I want to draw your attention to one of the questions in the non-comparable items. Leadership around campus is working to improve my pay. So the pay itself may not be great, right? But you have confidence that we're doing something about it and we're working. 3.5. You know, that's above where we said it's pretty good or good. And our change over the year is 0.14, or a change between our division and other divisions in the university is 0.14. So I'm not saying your pay is great. I'm saying you think, which is true, that we're working hard at making it better. And in last year, if you remember, the university invested $2.4 million in pay, retention, and merit. This year, it's $1.4 million in pay increases and merit for the university. So things are moving in that direction. There's certainly a commitment by senior leadership to keep going. As a matter of fact, in this next year, we will do another, last time it was called Mercer study. We'll do another salary equity study in this next year. This current year, I'm sorry, so that it can affect next July. Okay, so we continue to invest in making that happen. Some other major themes, we still need work, I still need work in senior leadership, transparency, communication, and connection, right? Made a lot of good gains this year. It's still not up to the standard that I would want and expect. That's where I need you to be more aware of what things are actually happening around you so that you can ascribe those to some of the efforts that are happening here. But I also need directors to be cascading communication down to you, so you know that these things are happening. You should have felt some of this before, right? You should have felt it this year because it's represented in the changes, the delta for this 1 year. Okay? Climate is important. Consistency of treatment of employees, setting clear work expectations, and policy application at all levels of the organization. Okay, sorry. And so this isn't just at the senior leadership level, this is at all levels of the organization. And then more on climate, we need to make more of an effort to seek input from everybody. Okay? And that's where, as you do your rollouts in your division, your director is going to ask you, how do we actually do this? Right? Because in this past year, I did a follow-up to the Engage West survey and items to get your input. Gave you options in terms of adding to Google Docs, just your ideas and great ideas and criticisms and all those kind of things. We came out to your departments, into your department meetings to try to do this. Sending out emails isn't always the best way, but it is a form of communication. We did that. And so I need to know, how do we actually do this with the division of 165 people, full-time people and hundreds of GAs and student staff? How do we actually get input? Need ideas on that. Score's still low, need to find out a way to fix it. Okay? So timeline. I will send out to you not only this PowerPoint presentation this week, but I will send to you our actual results. So it's in a PDF. Some of it will look familiar because the graphs that you saw earlier will be similar to the graphs that are in that PDF. And then you will actually get to see then the actual scores. Some of them are actually in here. You saw the numbers. But you'll get to see the actual scores, us compared to the university. I don't like this word, but I didn't know another word. Subdivision. Our division has two groups, enrollment management and student life. In our July meeting, staff development meeting, we're going to let John, and I will be leading, because our friend Alicia will not be here at that point. I will be leading then the student life side to do the rollout of those specific results. Again, this is the division. Each one of them is a little different. Some things to work on, other things not to work on that are different than the division. Okay? And then there will be some discussion then about what directors, institution leaders, and I can do to improve. So, I'm sorry, in your departments, and I already sent this out in the email, but essentially by July 15th, you will have your rollout in your department of the data. And then by August 15th, we will ask for the action items back to the senior leadership team from your rollout. So they have a month essentially to roll out, create the actions for this next year. We'll ask for them back. But what we need in that discussion is not just your department action items, but how you can then take this information that we did today and say, well, I have some great ideas about how Scott or John or Alicia or Kyle can do some things that will really make a difference. Now, a little bit of a caveat in that. If you remember in, what was it our February meeting when Sadie led the discussion about personality type? Remember that? Part of the outcome of personality type is you have one and other people have different ones, right? And so your ideas about how to do some of these things will necessarily come from a frame of reference that is about your personality type. And so to some extent, you may be expecting someone else to respond to you in the way that's reflective of your personality type when it's difficult for them to do so, right? So just keep that in mind as we have open ideas about how to respond. And so if it isn't exactly like you think it should have been, but it still meets the goal, that's an okay thing. And on next year's score, you can say, it's an okay thing. Wasn't the way I would have done it, but it's an okay thing. I'm going to mark all 5s. Don't do that. Just kidding. Okay, and then I will then, and senior leadership, will do our division action items by September 1st, so that then we can present those and only briefly. I'm not going to take up a whole staff development in September to do this, but kind of say, this is what we heard, these are the actions that we're going to do, we're going forward with them. So that you will know clearly by the beginning of September, or in the September staff development meeting, this is how we plan to address these things. Now, if you remember at the very beginning, the purpose of Engage West is to do not only employee engagement, but leadership development and accountability. And this is the accountability piece. In the next iteration of the director's evaluation, their supervisor is going to say, these are the 3 action items that you are doing for Engage West. What is your progress on these? How are you doing? And so to get that information, they have to come back out to you and say, how am I doing? There has to be discussion around it. There has to be connection with what we find out, what we do, and what we expect from ourselves later on. And that's the accountability piece. So I want you to hold us accountable. Kyle is holding me accountable. This afternoon, 2 o'clock, my evaluation with Dr. Marrero. I do know even ahead of this that I'm going to be employed at 3 o'clock. Just letting you know. He's already given me that clue that I don't have to pack up my office. But no, it's all good. This is a way of saying, how can we be better? And that's what Engage West is all about. How can we be better? And we only know that from your objective, honest feedback that comes in these surveys. So that's it. That's the rollout. Oh, well, thank you. So I'm not going to get into individual items or individual suggestions about how we may be able to do these and change these, because that's going to come during the process. But do you have any questions about the rollout? Do you have any questions about the methods, the way that we're doing it, the timeline, what the results might be? Do you have any comments about anything that you just want to get off your chest? Yes. So the question is, or the statement is, no other higher education institution has done this, and the answer is no. No other in the country, in the world, in this way have they done the Engage West employee engagement and leadership development piece. We're a leader in that. And probably because of that, it seems like we're building the plane as we're flying it. But again, it's the second iteration, much easier. Rollouts are going to be much easier. You're going to understand the language, all of those kind of things. Others? Don't be afraid. Yes, Wanda.
Is there any way to get the information for those individuals that have less than 5 people that they supervise? Don't need to know scores, just need to know areas that need attention.
Yeah, that is a great piece, and we've talked about that a lot in the survey development piece. And so the question is, for those areas that have less than 5 returned people that filled out the survey, is there a way to get information about those, even major themes? The answer really is no. And let me tell you why it's no. And we even have some directors that in some areas didn't get information. Even directors, because we have some smaller units. The anonymity is so important in this. So important. I assume that people are going to take this information, be very developmental about it, take it in and be self-reflective like I have been about these leadership scores, right? And really focus on the development of themselves and their areas towards a status of good, right? what we know and what we've seen in some instances as that becomes a retaliatory piece if they know more about it from a small group of people. So smaller than 5, you're going to be able to say, oh, I know who said that. Because you work with them every day, right? And so then your attitude about them changes. It might be, well, I don't really have to take that because I know that it was that person and, you know, they're kind of weird or they don't know what they're talking about anyway, right? So that's why we're not doing it. Now, in terms of the comments, you had the ability to write comments. And what's going to happen in that process, we don't have them yet, is the same thing that happened last year. Studer's going to scrub them for names, and then they're going to get them to us as senior leaders, and we're going to develop the themes around them. So that even at the director level, they won't have direct comments. They won't have, you know, in my area, it said this, right? We're going to have themes around those. And if you remember, they were pretty raw. Even the themes last year were pretty raw. So that shows a level of transparency. But I wish we could. We just can't. So that what's going to happen, though, is that you have an upline, whatever that upline manager is, and those results, you can make some assumptions about them, put them through your own filter, say, okay, this is probably right for me, but this one's probably not, and that's where your actions will really come from. Great question. Yes, Kate?
Will the survey change again next year, or will it stay the same as we have right now?
So the question is, will the survey change next year, or will it stay the same? This is an absolute guess, but I will bet 98% will be exactly the same as this year. Because the power in this is consistency over time, right? So the questions will probably remain the same. I do perceive that there will be probably a few changes. For instance, when we got to the point of being able to know at senior leadership, whether it was Scott or Kyle that was drawing the scores down, we have to separate them to know that. But when you answer the question, you're conflicted. Well, I believe this of Kyle. He's awesome. But I may not answer it that way for Scott. So I think that will probably be split in a way that gives each of us information more directly. There were a few other things in terms of the wording of the questions might elicit a certain response versus another response. They were pretty good about, and we had 2 people on the committee, they were pretty good about the nature of the question and if the way that it would elicit responses and differences in gender and ethnicity and all those kind of things, but it isn't perfect. And so all of those pieces will be looked at across this time to see can we tweak it. But in general, they're going to stay in the same categories, so we'll have summary means across all of them. And probably most of the questions will stay the same. If you noticed, last year's question, we had a satisfaction question on this. Last year, we had a satisfaction score. There's no satisfaction score on this, right? I don't know if that's a good or bad thing. I'd like to know if you're satisfied, because the previous definition of engagement was these X number of items, the means of those X number of items, plus satisfaction equal to engagement. And so this survey team said that's not an important thing. So things like that may change. Other thoughts, questions, concerns? As you get them, as you get these scores, as you go through your rollout in your department, as you get this PowerPoint and as you get the actual scores from the university, really need you to be reflective about that and positive about that, right? So no one score means something. No one score means something. It's the grouping of all of this and the piece that comes out of the whole experience that means something. And so I'd ask that you look at them in that light and ask that you look at them and say, oh, well, that might indicate that we need to do something in our department. or that might indicate that there's something at the division level that I'd like to just give an idea. That's great. I'm always open to those kind of things. I want you to feel free to, when you come across that thing, just pop out an email and say, hey, I've been thinking about this and blank, 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 blank. Okay? Because it's your input that makes meaning to this. As we have these discussions, I don't know what it means that people have said a certain score that the senior leader doesn't care about how I feel, right? I don't know what that means until I hear from you that it means this to you. So that's the level of discussion and openness and transparency that we have to have around this, or these things don't change. But the beauty of all this to me, the beauty of all of this, is that already in terms of engagement, we're at 4.11. That's a great place to be. It's a good place to work. There are things we can fix. There are things we can work on. But it's already a good place to be. And that is what I want you to get out of this today. So anything else for the good of the order? Anyone? Thank you for spending a Wednesday morning with me in this, and we'll keep working on engaging people and being better.